China made a microscopic change in the data, so small most analysts missed it. Reuters caught it first. A single rare earth magnet shipment for a U.S. defense contractor slipped from cleared to under review. Hours later, the Wall Street Journal confirmed Beijing had sped up every civilian shipment while tightening anything linked to American weapons. That one contrast exposed a fault line the Pentagon never wanted to see, because at the exact same moment, Bloomberg reported China's soybean orders from the U.S. collapsed, replaced by record Brazilian buys. Two unrelated sectors, defense and agriculture, moving in perfect sync. And the timing wasn't coincidence. It was choreography. The kind that only appears when a superpower stops signaling and starts acting. Bloomberg wrote earlier this month that China controls more than 90% of global processing capacity for the magnet-grade rare earth materials that sit at the core of nearly every modern weapons platform. The U.S. Geological Survey's recent data reinforced the same point. Without Chinese processing, American missile and aircraft production slows within weeks. Bessent stepped into his briefings already aware that a single licensing delay could freeze output across entire Pentagon supply chains. And when analysts told Reuters that components once cleared in hours were suddenly entering review periods, the tension in Washington elevated instantly. By midweek, Financial Times correspondents tracking agricultural flows reported that Chinese soybean purchases from the United States had plunged dramatically, with April shipments collapsing more than 40% from the previous year. USDA data showed China sitting on massive reserves, enough to delay U.S. imports while sourcing cheaper Brazilian supply at scale. The simultaneous tightening on rare earth magnets and cooling on soybeans marked a coordinated pattern rather than isolated moves. The two levers, defense and agriculture, struck at the U.S. military and America's farm economy in the same week. Bessent's interviews reflected the unease. When he insisted the flow would return to pre-April levels, Reuters noted how carefully he controlled his phrasing. His reassurances sounded less like confidence and more like an attempt to steady markets already reading the data on their own. Financial analysts quoted by Bloomberg said Chinese export behavior resembled selective, politically sensitive throttling, a practice Beijing historically used before announcing larger systemic controls. The core issue extended beyond minerals. Wall Street Journal coverage highlighted growing concerns in U.S. cybersecurity circles that certain Chinese tech platforms had been funneling data or vulnerabilities toward entities linked to the People's Liberation Army. Pentagon contractors publicly avoided the topic, but private briefings pointed to the same pattern. U.S. supply chains were tied not only to Chinese minerals, but to Chinese software infrastructure. The dual exposure, physical components and digital access, deepened Washington's anxiety. Soybean markets showed the second front forming quickly. USDA's April figures, cited by Reuters, stated that China imported only 1.38 million metric tons of American soybeans, a drop of nearly 44% year over year. S&P Global analysts projected China would likely purchase significantly fewer American soybeans in the coming season, even if political frameworks implied otherwise. In the same month, China secured more than 7 million tons of South American supply, bypassing U.S. exporters entirely. Financial Times reporting added another troubling detail. By the end of the year, China could control more than a third of the world's soybean stockpiles. That concentration, combined with cheaper Brazilian supply, gave Beijing the ability to delay U.S. purchases without risking domestic shortages. Analysts warned this would weaken American farm incomes at the exact moment Washington sought cooperation on rare earths. Bloomberg's logistics team documented how steep new U.S. tariffs had slashed container traffic on routes from China to West Coast ports. Some carriers reported declines of more than a third. Retail sector surveys indicated that many U.S. companies had not fully restarted holiday season orders because of climbing freight costs and uncertainty over tariff escalation. The result was a thinning buffer of inventory at a moment when supply chains were still healing from earlier shocks. Reuters interviewed several major retailers who expected higher prices on toys, electronics, apparel, and seasonal goods, including Walmart, which warned it would raise prices on non-food imports from China because tariff burdens forced cost adjustments. Smaller businesses were hit harder. Importers handling low-margin goods faced delays at Chinese ports, as well as higher customs fees in the U.S. One home goods company cited by Reuters estimated $1 million duty bill on Christmas merchandise that might not arrive in time for peak sales. Bessent watched these developments converge into a single system of pressure. Rare earth licensing delays threatened defense supply chains. Soybean reductions hit politically sensitive farm states. Tariff shocks tightened consumer markets. And, underlying all of it was a fragile framework agreement in which China delayed implementing stricter rare earth licensing for a year while promising to substantially increase soybean purchases. On paper, it created some breathing room. In reality, though, it left the United States dependent on promises without any enforcement mechanisms. Experts quoted by the Financial Times stressed that China had not publicly confirmed the soybean volumes American officials described. Analysts at CEUS warned that even if Beijing fulfilled its verbal commitments, the volumes would still fall below historical norms. The gap between political statements and logistical evidence just continued to widen. Amid that widening gap, the quiet shift in rare earth licensing behavior became the pulse of the crisis. Reuters noted that some suppliers tied to United States defense programs experienced unexplained review delays. Export control specialists pointed out that China's licensing overhaul, which was originally scheduled for immediate implementation, included provisions that allowed Beijing to deny or slow shipments to any entity considered a security risk. Even the temporary delay of the new rules, Bloomberg wrote, didn't actually alter the underlying architecture. The mechanism remained intact, ready to be activated. Within days, the New York Times echoed the same concerns, stating that China's grip on rare earth processing created an inescapable bottleneck for United States weapons manufacturing. Former defense officials quoted in the report emphasized that alternative supplies remained years away, not months. New processing facilities in the United States, supported by Pentagon grants, were progressing but had not yet cut dependence on Chinese refining stages. Against this backdrop, Bessent's tone shifted. He described Beijing's export threats as a real mistake, but analysts understood the subtext. If China executed full restrictions, it would not merely inconvenience United States industry, it would choke sectors foundational to national security. Bloomberg Intelligence estimated that the average American missile system requires dozens of magnet units produced almost exclusively in China. One licensing freeze could slow U.S. replenishment rates during a period when global security tensions were already rising. Soybean markets presented their own volatility. USDA forecasts suggested that if China delayed purchases until January, many U.S. farms could face cash flow disruptions severe enough to trigger local credit crises. Financial Times agriculture correspondents reported that some American producers were carrying higher than usual inventories because Chinese buyers had not booked early season orders. The danger was less about long-term permanence than about timing. A months-long delay could damage entire regional economies. Then came the emotional breakpoint. Not from rhetoric, data delivered it. Reuters released updated port figures showing that shipments of Brazilian soybeans to China hit their highest monthly total on record, outpacing U.S. supply by massive margins. Simultaneously, Bloomberg noted that Chinese authorities were accelerating magnet shipments to companies not linked to defense industries. The directional nature of the pressures was unmistakable. It created the pivot. China was not simply restricting, China was reallocating. The strategic effect landed instantly. If Beijing could slow United States-linked rare earth flows while accelerating civilian ones, it could undermine American defense readiness without disrupting global commercial supply. If China could delay United States soybean purchases while expanding South American imports, it could apply agricultural pressure without raising domestic food prices. This was not retaliation, it was calibration. And calibration carried far more long-term leverage. Wall Street Journal analysts called the dynamic a quiet squeeze, a tactic designed to weaken a rival without triggering global market panic. Even as the United States insisted the framework remained intact, shipping behavior hinted at deeper shifts already underway. By early autumn, United States retailers feared that Christmas inventories would fall short. The combination of fewer Chinese shipments, higher tariffs, and supply chain hesitation produced gaps that logistics firms just couldn't close before winter. Some analysts quoted by the New York Times warned that if China tightened rare earth licensing at the start of the year, the current retail shortages would feel minor compared to the shock United States factories might face. Agricultural markets reflected the same fragility. USDA economists said that even a brief delay in Chinese buying could depress farm incomes in key states. With Beijing holding record stockpiles, the leverage was clear. China could wait longer than American farmers could. Defense contractors faced their own countdown. Pentagon procurement officers, cited by Bloomberg, said that guidance system manufacturers were running lean inventories to avoid tying up capital. Any slowdown in magnet shipments risked production stalls at a moment when the United States military was replenishing stocks more quickly than usual. All of it returned to a single, unavoidable question: what happens when the one-year delay expires? Every analyst consulted by Financial Times agreed on one point. The licensing system, not the temporary reprieve, represented the real source of power. Once activated fully, Beijing could fine-tune export levels to apply pressure without overt confrontation. And that is where Bessent's concerns sharpened. Because if the framework rests on trust, and trust rests on behavior, the data shows behavior shifting already. Beijing's purchases are lighter, its rare earth reviews are longer, its civilian shipments are faster, its military-adjacent exports are slower. The trajectory mirrors every previous moment when China prepared broader controls. Reuters called it a pattern worth noting. As the seasonal trade cycle tightens and holiday inventories run thin, the real stakes move beyond consumer markets. What looks like a retail squeeze today could become a defense constraint tomorrow. And as United States farmers wait for orders that may not come until deep winter, the agricultural side of the leverage grows sharper. Thanksgiving will arrive with the framework still in place. But frameworks are not shields. They are temporary understandings. And temporary understandings last only as long as they serve the stronger party. Please like and subscribe. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us grow. Thank you.